अब बढ़ते हैं इन्वायरमेंट प्रोटेक्शन एक्ट में। क्वेश्चन नंबर 1, US EPA developed a state-of-the-art screening tool for administrative agencies to prioritize pollutant named as NATA, National Air Toxic Assessment. It is developed by US Environment Protection Agency US EPA. It is screening tools that help environment and public health agencies to identify, prioritize and control hazardous air pollutants HAPs. NATA use emission data, air quality modeling and risk assessment to estimate potential risk from the long-term exposure to the air toxic. Need of EPA was felt in India after the Bhopal tragedy. When was the Environmental Protection Act 1986 enacted by the Parliament of India? After the Bhopal gas tragedy in December 2000, 1984. EPA comes into the force. EPA comes into the force at P after Bhopal gas tragedy. Environmental Protection Act 1986. Maintenance of the harmonious relationship between the human and their environment. It gives an act of relation between human and their environment gives Air Pollution and Control Act 1981, Environmental Protection Act, Water Act 1974. The provision of environmental protection in the constitutions were made in the year of 1976. Other important acts in Indian Government: Environment Protection Act, Wildlife 1972, Prevention and Cruelty to Animal Act 1960, Biological Diversity Act 2002, Recycled Plastic and Plastic Manufacturing and Usage of Rule 1999, Construction and Demolition Waste Management Rule 2016. The submissions of environment audit report, the prescribed format was made mandatory under the under the Environment Protection Act under the rule of 1992. Under the EPA 1986, which ministry has issued the several notifications to tackle the problems of the hazardous waste management, that is MOEF. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change notified Solid Waste Management Rule 2016, Plastic Waste Management Rule 2016, Biomedical Waste Management Rule 2016, Construction and Demolition Waste Management 2016, Hazardous and Other Waste Management and Transboundary Movement 2016, E-Waste Management Rule 2022 and Battery Waste Rules 2022. Out of the total waste generation is about 1.5 million tons. Under the Act, the Environmental Protection 1986 are the complaint must process the types of spill prevention, control and countermeasure plan. B. The Environmental Protection Act 1986. Which of following is screen is not coming under the EPA 1986 power to appoint officer, penalties for the contraventions of the provision of the Act, the rules, order, the directions, to collaborate with CPCB in organizing the training of the operations. The Environmental Protection Act 1986, including the several specific sections outlining the powers and responsibilities of the government protecting and the environment. Section 4 grant the power to appoint officers and define their rules. Section 15 prescribe penalties for the contravening any provisions, act, rules, and direction issues under it. Section 10 provide the power for entry and inspection of including by the authorization persons. The Environmental Protection Act is passed in the years of 1986, 1986, 23 May 1986. The Environmental Protection Pollutant Act 1974, the Air Prevention and Control Act Pollution 1981, the Environmental Protection Act 1986, Green Tribunal Act 2010, the Water Prevention and Control Pollution Cess 1977, Indian Forest Act 1972, Wildlife Conservation Act 1972, Forest Conservation Act 1980, Noise Pollution Regulation and Control Rules 2000, Biological Diversity Act 2002, National Environment Tribunal Act 1995, the National Ambient Appellant 1997, the Public Liability Insurance 1991. Consider the following statements about the constitutional provisions for the environmental protections, that is B only second. Article 41A impose obligation on the state while 51A is applied to the citizens. Fundamental duties of Indian Constitution clearly impose duty in every citizen protect environment. Article 51 AG says that it shall be duty of the every citizen of India protect the improve and natural environment including forest, lake, river and wildlife have to compassion of the living creatures. Article 48A of the Constitution of a state that state shall be endeavor to protect and improve the environment and safeguard to the forest and wildlife of the country. This testimony is government's the awareness of the problem worldwide concerned since the protections. EPA 1986 is regarded as a umbrella act because of provide protecting whole environment. EPA has classified environmental tobacco smoke ETS is a class A carcinogen. Section 8 of Environment Protection Act 1986 mandated for the compliance with prescribed procedures and safeguard while handling hazardous substance. According to EPA 1986, environment pollution only refer to air pollution. Act empower their central government and coordinate action by the state government. The central government may issue direction to the provided or regulatory industries. इसमें आ जाएगा आंसर सी. आंसर सी में क्या है? ए, सी एंड डी. The central government may restrict area in which industries operate. The act empowers the central government to coordinate action by the state government. The central government may be issued direction to prohibit and regulate any industries. Which of following considered an environmental pollutants according to the Environmental Protection Act 1986? A gaseous substance beneficial to the environment, any solid substance present in high concentration beneficial to the environment, pollution, a liquid substance present in the concentrations of the injurious of the environment. The Environment Protection Act 1986 was enacted following the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment held at Stockholm in June 1972. Environment Protection Act Stockholm में हुआ था. The precautionary principle enraging in the Environmental Protection Act empathize ignoring potential risks for the sake of the development, treating environment protection as a secondary to the economic growth, taking preventive measure when an activity could harm the environment. Treating Environment Protection Act secondary to economic growth ये नहीं होगा. Reducing the authority of central government ये मैटर नहीं करती. The abundant The amendment in the Environmental Protection Act 1991 extended its provisions to occur coastal area and regulation of the hazardous substance. As per the Environmental Protection Rule 1986, following the general standard for the discharge of environment pollution, Part 1, effluent in this case of disposal inland, surface water and temperature of the 5 degree. Disposal of effluent shall not exceed the above the receiving water temperature 5 degree. एक्स्ट्रा एमसीक्यूज की बात करते हैं. The Government of India enacted the Environmental Protection Act 1986 under the Articles of 253. In the wake of Bhopal tragedy, the Government India enacted Environmental Protection Act 1986. The Environmental Protection Act 1986 passed in the March 1986. It is coming to the 4th 19 November 1986. The definition of the environmental pollution under the Environmental Protection Act. The presence in the environment of any environmental pollution. The provision of environmental protection in the Constitution were made in 1976. The 42 Amendment Act 1976. The provision for environmental protection in Constitution in India were made. This amendment introduced two key provisions. Article 48A. This article describes the state of endeavor to protect the improve of environment and safeguard of the forest and wildlife. Article 51A. This article makes it fundamental duties even citizens protect and improve the natural environment. This provision have been instrumental in raising environment consciousness and promoting the environmental protection initiative in India. Which of following act give the right to citizen file case against the violation of the environment norms? Environment Protection Act. Which of following has been described as the Magna Carta? Magna Carta. Stockholm Declaration. Stockholm Declaration adopted 1972 significant UN conference addressing ecosystem issues, emphasizing the importance of environmental protection, setting and the stage of the initial cooperations.